what's up, family? This is Marseille, aka the Property Pastor, here with Kingdom Legacy Builders, where our mission is to help everyday people to create a lasting legacy for future generations using real estate investing and wealth creation principles. Proverbs 13:22. It says that a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. And here at Kingdom Legacy Builders, we want to empower you with the tools, with the knowledge, with the skill sets that you need to apply kingdom principles, biblical principles, right? To help you to build a financial legacy, to help you to build a spiritual legacy for your children and also your children's children. Now, today we're going to be talking about a special subject and looking at the difference between single family investments or multifamily investments. You know, if you're looking at what should I invest in for my first rental property, as a part of our current series, we're talking all about what do you need to do, or how do you purchase your first rental in the next year. Now, before we get started, I want to ask you to make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel. Hit that like button and hit that subscribe button, because you're going to get keyed into brand new content. Every week we drop 2 new videos talking all about these principles through Kingdom Legacy Building. We're giving you real estate investing knowledge. We're giving you wealth building principles to help you in your station in life. Now, I don't know about you, but in my life, people have helped me to get to where I am. You know, and I would not be here without my dad being a blessing in my life, and other folks just speaking into me and helping me to learn along the way through mentorship, through teaching, through training, right? But my father was God put it on his heart years ago to be a blessing and to set me and my brother up for success. So he bought land. And in buying that land, he built his own house, and then he helped me to build my house, right? And he told me, he said, hey, this is for you and for your future generations. So we're here just to pass that on. We want to pay that forward and help you to build a legacy for your children and your children's children. So let's get into it, y'all. Let's talk a little bit about this subject. So as you're looking at buying your first rental property this year, one of the decisions that you'll have to make is, do I buy a single family home, which is going to be your traditional 3-bedroom, 2-bath type of house? Or am I going to buy a small multifamily home? Now, we're not talking about apartment complexes quite yet. What we're talking about is small multifamily homes, which are going to be duplexes, triplexes, or quadplexes. And that basically means you got 2 separate units in one building, or 3 or 4. All right, so let's look at some of the pros and cons, because there's a lot of different schools of thought out there. But I'm going to give you, from my perspective, what some of the pros and cons are of each type. Now, I own both type of investment in my portfolio, and I think they both have some trade-offs. So let's talk about it. First of all, single family homes, right? Some of the pros of a single family home is that a single family home is the most plentiful house available in most markets. So you drive down any street, you're going to see single family homes typically up and down that road. You'll see apartment complexes and things of that nature, but there's a ton of single family homes. So there's a lot of them to choose from. The other piece is that they typically attract a longer term tenant. So if you think about it, if you rented a single family house, ask yourself, how long did I actually stay in that house? I remember growing up, before my dad built his house, when we moved from one place to another, when we moved into our first, single family home as a rental, we stayed in that house for many years. It was probably about 8 to 10 years that we stayed in that house. So most of my childhood memories, at least for my middle school and teenage years, were living in that house. So typically, if you buy a single family home, it can be a little bit more of a passive type of investment. So you're going to have a tenant who's going to stay for multiple years. The other thing is, like I said, it can be somewhat hands-off, right? The tenant, in many cases, will be responsible for cutting the grass, and a lot of times the tenant will kind of treat that house somewhat like it's their own, because their neighbors are often, owners of their homes. So sometimes that mindset often translates over to your particular tenant. The other piece that's positive about a single family home is that single family homes typically appreciate very well over time. So the average appreciation is about 3 to 5% year over year. So that single family house is going to follow well with appreciation, if not exceed it. But there are also some cons, right? So some of the cons of a single family house is that vacancy, right? The impact of vacancy can be very high. So let's say, for example, you are renting, your single family house for, $1,500 a month, and you have a $1,000 mortgage, for example. As soon as you have a vacancy or you're dealing with an eviction, right, it's 0% income. So now if you don't have cash reserves, you're pretty much responsible for that difference. You have to make up that note, right? You have to pay that mortgage statement every single month. So vacancy can be very stressful, especially if you have one house, right? So if you got one rental and that house becomes vacant, the vacancy impact can be very high. The other thing is that cash flow can be on the lower side. And the reason I say that is because you've got that one income, and then depending on your market, the purchase price to rent ratio may not be that good. So if it's less than 1%, right, and 1% being, if you spent, $1,000, you get $1,000 of income per month in rent, and the purchase price was $100,000, that house just barely makes the 1% rule. We've talked about that before in other videos, right? But if you fall below that, say for example, you're only getting $800 a month in rent, and now your purchase price was $100,000. By the time you take out any property management, by the time you take out repairs, by the time you pay the taxes, by the time you pay the insurance, and you pay the mortgage, many times in those scenarios, you're barely breaking even. You're just above board, right? So if you are only making, $150 to $200 a month, you've got to buy a lot of houses in order to get to your financial independence goals, right? So one of the issues is that cash flow can be kind of low. The other piece is that because even while it's very plentiful, everybody's looking for it. So the other thing you got to realize is that competition can be very high. And that competition can be in the form of other investors. The competition can also be in the form of people who want to buy that property to live in it for themselves as a buyer. Now, let's look at small multifamily houses, right? Small multifamily houses, as I mentioned earlier, these are duplexes, triplexes, and quads, right? So that's going to be 2, 3, or 4 units. Now, some of the benefits of this type of investment is that they typically can generate a higher cash flow than single family houses. I own both types of properties in my portfolio, and my multifamily units far outpace my single family investments. So the thing about it is that the multifamily unit, like I said, it's going to generate much higher cash flow. And the reason is there's just more units, right? There's more income coming into the house. So if you've got a quadplex that everything is separately metered and the tenants pay, for their own water, their own electricity, if there's gas, if they pay for that, right? A lot of the profit stream comes back to you as the investor. So that's a really good thing, right? So, you typically do very well from a cash flow perspective. The other piece of it, though, too, is that there is very good vacancy protection. So we used the example earlier of a $1,500 rent coming in with $1,000 note. And the moment that, a person is gone, you're getting 0% income. Now, with a quadplex, for example, if one tenant moves out or you're doing an eviction or whatever, right, you're still collecting 75% of the rent. And a lot of times you're break even at about the 50% occupancy rate. So anything above that, you're still making money. So I think with a multifamily house, the nice part about it is the vacancy protection is very good. So you can still cover all your bills and typically not have to come out of pocket, which is one of the reasons I really like small multifamily houses. The other thing about it is that the costs are typically about the same as a single family home. So you're kind of buying an income stream, but your cash on cash return is typically much better. So the efficiency of your money gets to be a whole lot better. So you can typically buy a duplex or a triplex for not much more, for equal or not much more than you're going to spend for a single family house. The other thing that I like about small multifamily is they also qualify for conventional financing if you choose to use it. So commercial financing is basically going to apply to anything that's 5 units or above. So if you got a 5-plex or a 6-plex, you would actually have to qualify for a commercial loan for that type of property. But a duplex, triplex, or quad can actually fall under conventional financing. Now, why does that matter? One of the biggest differences that it matters is because of interest rates, right? So if you're just getting started, you're putting the property in your own name, and you don't, there's a lot of folks that say you shouldn't do that, but there are a lot of folks say that's not, you should. If you're financed properly, if you're insured properly, rather, you can do that without any problem. Now, the thing that you must see, though, is that, in terms of interest rates, that can make a difference on your bottom line cash flow. So one of the nice parts about it is on the smaller multifamily side is that they can qualify for conventional financing under normal, as long as you haven't purchased too many properties, basically. So some of the cons, though, let's look at some of the cons of this thing, right? One of the cons about small multifamily is that the turnover can actually be higher than single family. And what I've run into in my experience has been, if I have a fourplex, a one bedroom, one bath fourplex, or maybe a 2-in-1, I typically run into more what we call transient tenants. That's going to be somebody who's not really going to treat the house like it's a long-term place to stay. They may only be looking there to live there maybe a year or two, and then they're moving on. So you're going to have a more transient tenant, and that type of tenant, right? They're going to have, they may have more wear and tear on the property. You may be turning over the unit in terms of having to repaint it, replace carpet, more maintenance and things like that, right? So turnover can be higher. I've seen this typically higher with a small multifamily. The other thing is that there's not as many of them, right? So most markets don't have an abundance of small multifamily units, in them, right? Most of the markets are comprised of single family homes. Other thing is that a lot of times they're older, right? So a lot of the, back in the day, they built more of these type of houses. Duplex, triplexes, and quads were more plentiful back in the day. In this day and age, people want a yard. They want, privacy. They don't want people all up underneath them, right? So you just don't see quite as many of these type of units now. The other piece is that they tend to appreciate a little bit slower than single family homes. So single family homes are going to appreciate, that 3 to 5%. What I typically see is that small multifamily, it appreciates more in the 2% range, right? So if you're looking at your long range, you typically are buying small multifamily for cash flow, but you're buying single family, for cash flow as well, but you're also getting a much better appreciation price point. The other thing about these small multifamily units is that they tend to be more management intensive. So if you are managing this unit by yourself, if you're being your own property manager, a lot of folks will buy a duplex, they live on one side and they rent the other side. Now that's going to be more management intensive because that person could be your neighbor. But then on top of it, if you are not living there, then you've got 4 tenants. You can have anywhere from 2 to 4 tenants that you're dealing with versus a single family. You're only dealing with one person or one family. But now you've got all these people, right, that you got to deal with. So there's more leases to have. There's more keys to keep up with. There's more issues they're going to run into. If there's everything separately metered, like the sewer system or the water supply system, those are all new systems. If you got 4 HVAC systems and all that kind of stuff, it's 4 different things that you got to keep up with. So while there are great from the cash flow perspective, there are some other issues that you run into on the small multifamily side as well. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I have both in my portfolio, right? And I think that a starting investor will do very well with a small multifamily unit. The challenge is actually finding one. I was very fortunate when I started. I bought a quadplex for my first investment back in 2017. So about 3.5 years ago, I was blessed to find a quadplex that I got it for a steal. We upgraded it, right? We refinanced it, and it's still to this day the number one performer in my whole portfolio. But I don't have a lot of. You don't see those every single day. So as you look at this thing, for me, right, I do like both because what if you look at it, you got the appreciation that happens over time. And one of my mentors told me, say, hey, just if you get a good fold of single family houses, after 10, 15 years, those houses have appreciated greatly, right? And you can either sell those or you can refinance the equity and just reuse that money all over again. But what I typically recommend is that people are starting out, they can do a few things, right? You can actually buy a single family house. If you're single, you can house hack, right? You can buy that single family house, say it's a 3 or 4 bedroom, and you just rent the other rooms out, right? And now you're getting kind of the best of both worlds. And if you don't mind having roommates and all those kind of things, that can be very profitable for you. So I think the big piece here is that, we may be saying, well, which one is better? The answer is that it depends. It depends on your goals. It depends on, how you're made up, in terms of, do you want to deal with a bunch of tenants? Do you want to have a management intensive property, or do you want to be really hands off? So really, it really depends. There's no concrete answer to that question. But I wanted to kind of show you guys some of the pros and cons of both types of investments so that you can make the best choice for yourself. Like I said, I recommend having both, kind of diversifying, and they've both done really well for me in my portfolio. You can't go wrong, investing in real estate if you buy right. I wanted to share some of those pros and cons with you. I hope this information has been beneficial to you. If you do have questions, make sure you drop them in the comment section. If you got some pros and cons or experiences that you've had, make sure you share them with us so that we can share and learn together. I want to thank you for tuning into today's video. Remember, make sure you like and subscribe to the content. We're going to be posting new videos every single week to help you along in your journey. I'm cheering for you as you get ready to buy that first investment property. Make sure you shoot me your questions. Make sure you shoot me your comments. And make sure you like and subscribe. God bless you. I'm praying for you. Thanks again. Love you guys. Can't wait to see you again soon.